I'm working on a quilt that's quite complicated. It has a top border, side borders, and a bottom border that's a very small. It's like two and a half inch border all the way around. It's green. Then down the left side, it has a area of blocks, and those blocks are about 12 by 12, and I'm putting a pattern in the blocks, then putting a maple leaf pattern in those blocks because they are maple leaf blocks. There's no sashing in between the blocks. The small border, top and sides, I'm placing a maple leaf pattern in that also. Then there's also a Bargello section of this. It's kind of a strange quilt, probably the most strange layout of a quilt that I've worked on in a long time. The maple leaf blocks, they go down the left side and across the bottom. Then the Bargello starts to the right edge of that maple leaf block, the blocks, and it goes to the small border towards the right. And this is not a very large quilt, but it is complicated. And Laurie Thomas from It's a Quilting Thing designed the Bargello pattern for me to fit. I made some diagrams, emailed her, and she designed the pattern to fit this block area. And here's I did a border or a boundary, and then I put the pattern that she had designed this in two sections, and I put this in, adjust it, and quilt this Bargello area. I can quilt there's actually two rows of blocks, a row here like this, and then another row this like this. She designed this to cover two rows, and it fits really well. But it takes a lot of time because there's many thread changes, different color threads in different block areas. I've quilted the top border, and I've quilted some of the side borders. I'm chunking the side borders as I go down, and as I quilt the side borders and quilt the maple leaf blocks that's on the left side, quilt the Bargello area as I go, quilt the right side border, and I continue to quilt everything as I go. I don't want to quilt and then have to turn this quilt or do anything that's unnecessary. I've quilted the left side border in this area I'm working on. I'm going to quilt this right side border. Now I'm going to get this pattern group into position so I can quilt this area inside of this boundary. I've moved the machine head so that the needle is at the end point of the previously quilted side border area. All I'm going to do now is relocate this group of patterns to fit in this boundary. I'm going to, I do everything the simplest way I can find. And I find that if I just select this pattern group and right click, use relocate, but this time I'm going to use shift selected to one point, and I'm going to turn on the end snap, then let my mouse cursor snap to this point, click this point. The needle is sitting where I want the stitching to start, so I'll simply click yes, and this pattern group will move into the correct position for quilting. All I need to do now is go and check everything to make sure that everything is going to be lined up the way I want it to be. This alignment of the patterns along the inside of this right side border looks good. Now I'll move my machine to the outer edge of the side border and check the alignment of this pattern. I don't want it to quilt out to the edge or off the edge. I want it to stay back far enough that it will not be covered by the binding. The machine head is sitting on the right side of this right side border, and this tells me that the alignment of the patterns is going to stitch where I want it to. All I need to do now is quilt this section out. The right side border is finished, and now I'm ready to start quilting the next two blocks in this left side where the maple leaf blocks are located. I don't normally use the pattern to boundary, but in this case I'm going to. And since I'm going to do that, I needed to make sure I made my boundary correctly. To make a boundary like this is I said earlier this was a 12-inch square, but it's a 9-inch square. To make this use pattern to boundary, I have to define the baseline of the block so that the pattern will go in correctly. And I have clicked this lower left, lower right, upper left, and hit stop. And I did that for the two boundaries. I can quilt two blocks. I want to put this pattern in the top block and this pattern in the lower block. I'm going to alternate these all the way down this quilt. I'll go over and select my pattern, go up to pattern to boundary. My boundary is selected, so when I click on pattern to boundary, it should go in correctly. There, my pattern is in that boundary, and the alignment looks good. I may make some minor adjustments to it, but I don't think I'm going to be needing to do that. I'm going to leave it alone. I'll go down to the next block, select the boundary, select the pattern, go to pattern to boundary, and it should pop right into place and be adjusted the way I want it to look. There it is. It's in there. I don't see any adjustment necessary, so I'll just quilt these two blocks as they are. This is the final section at the bottom of this Bargello quilt. I've clicked in a boundary, and on the right you can see that this side, these blocks do not come all the way down. They're chopped off right here. So I'm going to have to put the pattern in, and then I'm going to need to use fill inside to remove any section of pattern that falls down in this lower area. I have carefully placed this left part of this pattern. This pattern is designed now in two sections, and I've placed it. I'm going to place this pattern, and then I'll do the fill inside. The pattern is placed now in this section, and I snapped these two sections together right at this point right here. What I'm going to do now is select this pattern and do the fill inside. I want to remove this part of the pattern in this area. Anything below the boundary I want to get rid of. I'm just going to select the fill inside and let Creative Studio remove this section of the pattern. You can see by my bars down at the lower area that it's working to remove that part of the pattern. All the pattern below the boundary area has been removed, and what I'll do now is I'll just quilt this section of the Bargello. That section of the Bargello has been quilted. I'm going to remove the pattern, remove the boundary, and I'm going to make a new boundary for the next area that's down in this area. This Bargello part just goes straight across this way, but there's two small sections in here that have to be quilted. I have drawn in another boundary, and then there will be one more small area left in this place right here, in this part of it to quilt. Right now I'm going to place my patterns in, and I'm going to do a fill inside again and quilt this section out. The patterns are in place. They've been adjusted to fit in the areas like this and down through here. Now I'm going to use fill inside to remove all of this pattern outside the boundary. Creative Studio has finished doing the fill inside, and now I'll quilt out this section and then make my boundary and quilt what's left in this area. This part of the Bargello section has been quilted. Now I'm going to remove the patterns, make a new bound, and remove the boundary and make a new boundary to quilt this area. The last boundary is in place. Now I'll place the patterns and do the fill inside. The pattern has been placed, it's been adjusted, and what I'm concerned about is just filling this area here. And when I do the fill inside, Creative Studio is going to remove all of this below here and all of this below the boundary. To get this to work, I needed to select both this left part and the right part. Now I will do the fill inside. There it is. Creative Studio has removed all of the pattern outside the boundary. Now all I need to do is quilt this last section. That section has been quilted. I'm finished with all the Bargello. All I need to do now is finish the side borders and the pattern, the oak or the maple leaf pattern that was running down the left side and across the bottom. I'm going to do some relocate side border patterns. I want this group of patterns here to appear right there. So what I'm going to do is just select these. This is all one combined group of patterns. I'm going to zoom in, right click, relocate, shift selected to one point. I want to move this point to the exact place where the needle is. I'm going to click yes, and Creative Studio is going to realign that part, that group of patterns, to start at the end of the last side border pattern that was quilted. It's in place, ready to quilt. I need to tell it it's unsewn, and it'll be able to sew it again. The group of patterns on the left border, I'm going to select those. I'm going to right click, choose relocate, shift selected to one point, and this is the point I want to move. Now when Creative Studio comes up with the instructions, I'll click yes. That tells it that yes, I do want to do this. And Creative Studio will move all those patterns right into the correct location. There they are. They're there, ready to quilt. All I need to do is tell them that they're unsewn. There we're good to go. It'll quilt this left side border first, then it will go over and quilt the right side border. When I'm finished with my side borders, I'll take the patterns that are going to be the bottom border, and I will just simply make a boundary and I will move them in place. I completed the blocks on the side and along the bottom, and I alternated the two patterns down the side and across the bottom. Everything is quilted in this quilt project, so it's all finished. You can see that I use mostly relocate selected to one point, or relocate, shift alt to one point. That's what I do with most of my relocate now, and that serves me well. It's easy. It always aligns the patterns the way I want them to, and I hope this information is of value to some of you.